Number 10. Draculana. To be clear, when we talk about heroes you've never heard of, we're more talking about those that sit on the outskirts of the superhero fandoms, so you won't find them likely on the big screen or on DC's or Marvel's main teams like the Justice League, Avengers, or the X-Men. Instead, these are heroes who come from a more humble background by comparison. Some of them may have been simply forgotten due to just how long they've been around, whereas others typically are associated with smaller or even in some cases now defunct publishers. Coming from the world of fellow indie hero Vampirella, Draculana is sort of Ella's adopted sister and also kind of her ex-lover or ex-one-night stand. There have actually been at least 2 different Draculanas, possibly 3 at this point. One is Lilith's biological daughter and the biological twin sister of Vampy, who is blonde. The other one, the one I'm focusing on, who was once Vampy's lover, became obsessed with her and was eventually adopted by Lilith to become the new Draculana. If you want to learn more about her and other Vampy adjacent characters, Sacred 6 is a pretty cool comic that I would recommend that you check out. Or you can learn more about this version of Draculana in the 2019 Vampirella series from Dynamite. Both of those series, by the way, are by Christopher Priest. Both Draculanas go by the name Victory, although the one we're talking about here was originally named Victoria, but the two do differ in terms of appearance and, like I said, blood relation. Blood relation in this context almost becomes a vampire pun. This new Draculana isn't exactly a vampire, by the way, but is armed with a demonic ring that basically grants her powers similar to one, allowing her to accurately play the part. Draculana is currently a property of Dynamite Comics. Number 9. Tony Chu. Tony Chu is a quirky and unique character, but still is ultimately a hero, and even technically has superpowers, so he would qualify as a superhero. Tony is a detective who possesses the unique power of sebopathy. Whatever he eats, except for beets, he gains in-depth knowledge of, being able to tell where all the ingredients that make it up came from, being able to taste everything about that ingested food. Tony uses this skill to basically solve murders mainly, sometimes even ingesting parts of victims or the accused, sometimes even ingesting parts of the victims or the suspects to learn more about the case and help solve it. He initially worked for the Philadelphia Police Department, but ultimately gets fired after they witness him eating part of a deceased suspect. He later is hired by the FDA. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, there are actually a lot more indie superheroes that I would love to tell you about as we dive into the world of unknown supers. So if you want to learn more, be sure to let us know by commenting below and giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Red Sonja. One of my favorite lesser known heroes is Red Sonja. Red Sonja comes to us from the less sci-fi, more fantasy based world of sword and sorcery. She is an extremely gifted fighter, marksman, and sword bearer. Red Sonja, the she-devil, is said to have been given her name for, well, many different reasons. One such story as to how she got her name is that she left to seek out adventure and her fortune and became a mercenary, earning the name Red because of all the blood that she spilled. Red Sonja, while not a traditional hero, pretty much always stands up to those who are cruel and corrupt, often fighting for those who are oppressed, even against her better judgment. She has even fought death before in combat and won, allowing her to live on when she was on the brink of death. Red Sonja was once a character from the Marvel Comics wheelhouse, but currently calls Dynamite Comics her home.
Number 7. Batwalker. I'm gonna be honest, I just assumed this had already been done in the past, but no. Dinosaur versions of DC's superheroes had not been done before. I'm alright with this because that means this year we were treated to the Jurassic League, a DC story that takes place on an Earth where heroes like Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman are actually dinosaurs that protect the puny human race from the carnivore dinosaurs who would eat them. There's a Brachiosaurus Supersaur from another world who looks eerily like Superman, a Triceratops Wonder Dawn hailing from the Isle of Trimascara, and on the outskirts of Growltham City we are introduced to Batwalker, an Allosaurus who dresses up like a bat after the loss of his parents at the hands of an insane Dilophosaurus who goes by the name Jokerzard. I mean, there's even a panel of this comically green Allosaurus throwing a stone batarang, and it's just something that I never knew I needed in my life until this point. I'm just so glad it exists.
Number 6. Savage Dragon. Savage Dragon is a popular hero as far as the lesser known or indie heroes go, so if you haven't heard of him before, you might want to check him out. Initially, his origins were a mystery. All we knew was that he was a humanoid, green-skinned, dragon-like character who decided to fight as a police officer and hero, fighting against the criminal and mutant super freaks of Chicago. That's also in part because Savage Dragon initially had really bad amnesia in the comics, so he didn't actually even remember his own origin story at the time. Savage Dragon hails from Image Comics and was originally introduced as simply Dragon before being known under the mantle of Savage Dragon. His powers include super strength and super healing. Number 5. Violator. Violator was always an indie villain that haunted my nightmares as a kid. Violator is the clown character with blue face paint from the Spawn film who was played by John Leguizamo. I love John Leguizamo, but this role, wow. Also, John Leguizamo and everything is kind of wow, it's great. Not only did he crush it, but it also felt like he kind of crushed me and my soul under the terror of the Violator. The Violator in the comics is a Spawn villain who is one of the most powerful demons of hell. He often focuses on getting Spawn to use his necro powers, trying to get him sent back to hell to become Malebolgia's servant faster, but also serves to prepare Hellspawn for joining the army of Satan. Of course, that doesn't mean that he enjoys his job, and he often seeks to try and undermine his master. Violator is basically immortal as well. Despite dying many times, he's often reanimated shortly after in hell, only to return to torment Spawn some more. Yay. Number 4. Luther Strode. Luther Strode is the main character in the Strange Talent of Luther Strode series, a series that hails from Image Comics. Luther ends up acquiring powers that enhance his strength, durability, speed, and combat skills after receiving a mail-order exercise program known as the Hercules Method. Luther's powers, however, only create more harm than good in his life and lead to a lot of death, much of it happening as a result of his own involvement. Try as he might to try and do good with it. While not a conventional hero, Luther definitely fits the bill of an anti-hero, or more accurately tragic hero archetype, with everything going awry no matter his intent. He's also someone I would personally love to see take on the hero who made our number 2 spot.
Number 3. Abyss. Alright, before you jump on me in the comments, this isn't the villain Abyss. That guy was Lex Luthor's own evil Batman who was honestly kinda cool, but he did not last very long. Abyss was defeated by Batman, who got some massive help from a Bodnesian police officer named Detective Kea, who helped Batman not only survive but even forced Abyss to retreat after he had defeated most of Batman Incorporated, which led him straight into a defeat at the hands of the Dark Knight himself. Now, after Abyss had been defeated, Kaya found some of the villain's equipment and decided to hunt down the ones who had ended her parents' lives. There's a lot of parallels between Batman and the characters in and around him in the later issues of Batman Volume 3 that came out this year in 2022. Anyways, Batman offered to help Kaya, but in helping her, he also talked her into just arresting the criminals instead of doing what she was planning to do, which I'm sure you can imagine what that was. She wasn't brought into Batman Inc., but she is now another ally of Batman, and I hope she gets some more appearances in the comics from this point on because the costume's pretty cool.
Number 2. Bulletproof. You know Invincible, but do you know Bulletproof? Fans of the comic series likely do, but if you just became an Invincible fan via the animated series, then this isn't a character that you'd be familiar with just yet. After all, at this point we've only had 1 season so far, so it's very likely Bulletproof will appear in the series, just not until a bit later on. Bulletproof is Xandel Rudolph. He got his powers as a result of his brother using him as basically a science experiment, as his brother Tyrone was actually obsessed with superpowers. Xandel would end up getting powers as a result of this mad science, while his brother would end up dead. Bulletproof also goes on to take up the Invincible mantle at one point, filling in for Mark when he is off-world. Xandel's powers are based on energy absorption, which I think is one of the strongest power sets to have personally. Bulletproof, like other heroes in the Invincible universe, comes to us from Skybound, which is an imprint of Image Comics. Number 1. The Darkness. The Darkness is an ancient elemental force that takes up residence in a host, granting them special powers. One of the most famous hosts that we have come to know as the Darkness is Jackie Estacado. The powers that Jackie wields are similar to what you'd expect from some kind of demonic force. They're also honestly comparable to Venom's power set from Marvel Comics, at least I see a lot of similarities there. The Darkness gives you access to a sort of mystical armor which can be summoned at will. It also grants the user a healing factor, shapeshift abilities, and through them also the ability to fly via wings that you can create. Jackie as the Darkness can also create dark tendrils, which he can also turn into weapons, and he can also summon entities known as Darklings. While more of an anti-hero due to his methods, Jackie Estacado is still a hero in the sense that he generally fights on the side of good. The Darkness hails from Top Cow Productions. And if you do know the Witchblade, you probably know the Darkness, or vice versa.
Starting us off in at number 10, Vlad Plasmus. In the world of Danny Phantom, there exists a select few individuals with the ability to transition between a human form and a ghost form. One of these is Danny Fenton, the other is a female clone of him named Danny Fenton, but the third is probably the most important one, Vlad Plasmus, also known as Vlad Masters, Amity Park's mayor, and Danny's dad's old college friend who's in love with his wife. Yeah, Vlad is secretly a human-ghost hybrid, actually the first to come into existence, following an accident that was caused by a college experiment that he was working on with Jack and Maddie, which are Danny's parents, in which Vlad gained his powers. Having been a half-ghost for the last 20 years, he serves as the main antagonist of the series, acting as just Danny's ultimate villain. But I mean, being a human-ghost hybrid and being the reason Danny Phantom goes dark in another timeline where his family's blown up is certainly worthy of getting him on this list. Plus, I love Danny Phantom. Butch, send me a pop figure, please. I couldn't find one.
Number 9. Haziral. Haziral is the demon who possesses the leader of the Rat Queens, Hannah. Hannah is an elven necromancer in the series whose very existence as well as the type of magic she practiced made her controversial while growing up. As such, she ends up making a pact with the demon Haziral to get access to magic so that she can pass her classes at Mage U. This prompts her to grow horns and also makes her indebted and permanently bonded to the demon. Using such dark magic has consequences, of course, and when she taps into it, it can cause Hannah to go kind of into a pretty crazy frenzy, losing control over herself as her darker side and the demon within her takes over. In Rat Queens, Hannah was prompted to use this power again to save her friends and fellow Rat Queens after years of resisting the temptation of said demonic power. Unfortunately, this also meant she would have to confront Haziral after years of staving off the demon's power and influence. In a way, Haziral is also like a symbol for Hannah's own inner demons, though he is himself literally a demon with his own wants and desires. Both a symbol and an actual demon. Mainly, he loves Hannah and he wants to continue to be as close to her at any cost. Which is obviously not very good for her, but Hannah also has a lot of shit that she needs to work out, so yeah.
And it ain't Dave. Dave's origin is unknown as of yet, but it is heavily inferred that he was like the other thousands of robots in the series, created by humans to serve a certain task. However, the robots became advanced enough to form their own conscious thoughts, so of course they revolted and killed off the entire human race. It was shown that Dave was one of the robots that served in combat and also helped fight off numerous alien races, and after the wars, robots seemed to act entirely like humans, adopting their culture and their way of life. Dave had a wife named Sally, who he actually later divorced because apparently even robot girlfriends are unbearable, and a son called Scotty. However, he is now a nobody working as an office drone, which only makes him more of a villain, despite being the protagonist of the story, because like, given that he wiped out the entire human race, I think it's safe to say that he's a villain.
Number 7. Vampirella, but you can call her Vampy. Vampirella isn't a conventional hero by any means, but she definitely tries to do what's best by folks while still being a vampire from outer space, and at the same time with ties to Lilith and Hell. Overall, she's both complicated and also kinda super simple, and it's that weird blend of those two very different elements that I love about her. Vampy, being an intergalactic vampire, is super strong, fast, can fly because she actually has wings, and also has been shown to have access to advanced technology at times due to her ties to the planet Draculon. Vampirella is currently attached to Dynamite Comics, but was originally a property of Warren Publishing.
And at 6, death. We all love a good rendition of death, right? Of course we do, that's like the foundation of any good comic storyline. Well, in East of West, the whole story is about death, with this version of the Horseman being the protagonist of the series. And not only is he the Horseman of Death, but they're actually a horseman as well, considering how East of West is Wild West themed. However, this time around, Death, formerly of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, fell in love with someone named Xyloin, something like that. I probably butchered it, but oh well. And then had a son with her, which is a whole other can of worms. Presumably killed by Bel Solomon of the Chosen though. He survived with the help of Wolf and Crow. Since then, the White Horseman embarked on a quest for revenge over his wife and son. And in the most recent incarnation, Death possessed skin that was jet black instead of the pure white skin that he has now. He was also the only horseman who didn't get a gender change in the new reincarnation. Alright, I mean it's Death, so Death is genderless. But I mean, he may be good in the story though, but I think it's safe to say that Death before this series was a pretty, well, like, death-loving guy. Self-love. Number 5. Bat
Prince. Another alternate version of Batman, I know, but he belongs to probably one of my favorite alternate reality stories to come out of DC Comics, Dark Knights of Steel. This story takes place in a world of medieval fantasy where the Wayne family ruled their kingdom until the mother and father of Superman came to Earth. The L family house became rulers of the land after a horrible attack on the Wayne family. Now, as the surviving son of the Waynes, Bruce serves as both a knight and son to the L family, with his network of Robins and his brilliant mind. But as the world is at each other's throats in this story, this Bat Prince learns about the actions that led to his birth and the powers he now possesses as a half-Kryptonian Dark Knight. Dark Knights of Steel that came out this year in 2022 just has so many interesting and fresh takes on classic DC characters. It's fresh and fun, and I got a variant cover of the first issue and it looks so sweet. Maybe one day I'll let you guys see it. Maybe. But definitely read this story. Definitely do it.
In it for Nemesis. At the start of this series, the supervillain Nemesis destroys a building in Tokyo, killing a SWAT team and a police inspector. In Washington, D.C., the FBI informs Metro Police Chief Inspector Blake Morrow that Nemesis is targeting him next. Haha. Wonderful. He's given a card reading Black Morrow, March 12th at midnight, flatline still counts. Morrow has his family put in protective custody, and then Nemesis hijacks Air Force One over the District of Columbia, taking the United States president hostage and crashing the plane. Nemesis makes an international broadcast, revealing the president as a hostage in front of him, and then finishing it off by saying, "It's time you hail your new chief." Nemesis reveals to his henchman that his real name is Matt Anderson, and his father had committed suicide after Morrow tried to imprison him for hunting runaway teenagers with his rich friends. Bored of well behavior and less excitement, Anderson traveled around the world to learn the ways of crime, hoping to fulfill his mother's dying wish to have Morrow killed. So I think you can understand that this guy is pretty messed up and a powerful villain.
Number 3, Radiant Black. Radiant Black is Nathan Burnett, or was Nathan Burnett. Nathan to start, anyways. Going to try not to spoil this series because it's one that I think we should all be reading, so I'm just gonna leave it at Nathan for now. Radiant Black is the first hero we meet in this series. In issue number 1, Nathan ends up getting the powers of the Black Radiant, which basically means he has the powers of a black hole. Radiant Black can manipulate gravity and also becomes super dense with this power set. The downside for this hero is being new means that he's pretty inexperienced in the comics thus far. However, gravity manipulation as a power set is insane, which is how he ranks so high up on this list despite his inexperience. Radiant Black hails from Image Comics, and like I said, if you have not checked out this series and gotten to know the Radiants yet, well, you definitely need to change that, and you need to do so. It's like Power Rangers, but possibly cooler, and I say that having much respect and much love for Power Rangers. So that's not a snub at all, it's just like, it's really good.
Penultimately, in number 2, Overlord. A super-powered crime lord who operates out of Chicago, he is the archenemy of the Savage Dragon and the leader of Vicious Circle. There have been 3 people who had this mantle though: Antonio Seghetti, who I keep trying to call Antonio Spaghetti, Victor Nixon, and Flash Mercury. Antonio Seghetti grew up in Chicago around the time of Al Capone and became fascinated with the mafia way of life. When his sister was being in an alleyway, the 8-year-old Seghetti stabbed the man responsible and claimed his first victim. This act led to a life of crime, and he soon came under the wing of a man who would become Octopus, whilst also rising up through the ranks of the mafia. Once he had reached a position of authority in the mafia, Seghetti vowed that he would never lose his power, but his position came under threat when a superpowered freak became the dominant figures in Chicago's crime sector. Seeking resources and methods with which to cement his leadership position in Chicago, Seghetti forced alliances with the Nation of Lieberheim and cyberdata organizations, and as well became Overlord, because that's what you do.
Number 1, Lady Death. Because, you know, one comic book version of Death wasn't enough, so we had to do another one. Lady Death is one of the most powerful female supervillains out there, as she is literally the embodiment of death. And if you think you know about this Lady Death, you might not, because we're not talking about the one from Marvel. She hails from the bad girl comic days, where it was trendy for female characters to be bad, whether that be bad as anti-heroes, full-on heroes, or villains. In Lady Death's case, she was mainly known as a villain. She first debuted with Chaos Comics, but has changed publishers since her initial appearance with them. Lady Death originally was the beautiful beautiful and sexy woman who seduced Ernest Fairchild into becoming a full-on psychotic killer, who would later become known as Evil Ernie. As such, her first appearance was in Evil Ernie issue number 1 in the original black and white 1991 series. The Evil Ernie War of the Dead series finishes with Ernie managing to kill everyone on Earth in order to win Lady Death's favor. He does so by instigating an all-out nuclear war, ending the story with a mushroom cloud, and then ending the story again with a mushroom cloud of his face. This Evil Ernie never dies.
And coming in at number 10, Vanish. Image Comics seems to be going back to its gritty, magical roots with Vanish. Vanish follows Oliver Harrison. This chosen one peaked at the age of 14 when he took down the leader of the biggest threat to his universe in a mystical place called the Everkeep. Now, as an adult, this chosen one indulges in every vice he can, living a mediocre, pretty sloppy life. Until a group of heroes show up called the Prestige, who are actually the followers of the threat that Oliver took down when he was 14. Now, using his magical abilities, Oliver takes it on himself to play the part of a hero in the disguise of a villain to bring down the heroic Prestige. The comic builds up this super cool, magic but violent world. It's incredibly gritty but filled with dark fantasy and magic, and it's just so cool. Number 9, Rogue Son. Dylan Siegel has been living life with his mom when he's suddenly called to a reading of his estranged father's will. Now, during that reading, he discovers his dear old dad was a superhero called Rogue Son, and now Dylan has been granted the superhero mantle for himself. Now, this super angsty teen is in charge of protecting our world from the forces of the supernatural, while also trying to figure out who exactly took down his dad. The art in this story is awesome, and Rogue Son's suit is incredibly cool. With really cool fire-based abilities and a whole lot of family drama, Rogue Son from Image Comics is a fun story you should definitely check out. Number 8, Dr. Multiverse. Alright, breaking away from Image Comics now and landing firmly in DC's territory, we have Maya Chamara, Dr. Multiverse. Dr. Multiverse is alone in the multiverse, meaning there is only one of her. Originating from Earth 8, Maya was bathed in cosmic energies and was granted the powers of the multiverse, which basically means that she's able to see variants and alternate versions of people living in different realities. She can see people and objects passing between dimensions, and she has the ability to locate and track anything she has come into contact with throughout the multiverse. She also has access to vast energy manipulation abilities, which let her fire blasts and create shields, but she can totally open up portals to other universes and send people back to their own universe. This former member of the Retaliators became part of the Justice League Incarnate, using her multiversal powers to help this multiversal team of heroes. She's like a DC version of Marvel's Captain Universe, Starbrand, and America Chavez all just mixed into one, but I think she's pretty alright. If you guys are enjoying this video so far, make sure you drop a like to let us know you want more videos similar to this one. Just one little click's all you gotta do. Thanks.
Number 7, Scorpiona. Scorpiona was known for being one of Rita Repulsa's most capable enforcers in the television show Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and the same can be said for her comic book counterpart. In fact, I'd even say that Scorpiona is a bit more ruthless in the comics, in my opinion. She ends up becoming a somewhat reluctant and sassy ally later on, but starts out as a strong and menacing villain to the Power Rangers. Scorpiona is known for her determination, expert fighting skills, and her intelligence. She initially is presented as a major enemy for Tommy Oliver, the Green Ranger, as he struggles to fight against Rita Repulsa's influence and hold over him. Scorpiona would also go on to work alongside Lord Draken, the evil alternate future version of Tommy, and would later succeed him as the leader of his army.
Number 6, the Spirit of Variance, Voxigne. Sean Cassidy is not a new character by any stretch of the imagination, but in Legion of X number 7 by Marvel, he does become something completely new. Sean was betrayed by Moira McTaggart, who stole his face so she could enter into Krakoa, so when he was brought back to life, he was rather upset. Now, there's a whole thing going on as well with the character of Legion right now that I just can't get into, but essentially, a character named Mother Righteous offers Legion a gift in the form of a certain kind of power. David Haller refuses this gift, but luckily for us, Sean Cassidy was there to take it instead. Making a deal with Mother Righteous, Cassidy was given, or I guess possessed by, a cast out spirit of vengeance called the Spirit of variants. This transformed Banshee into a flaming skull version of himself named Voxigne, which is the voice of fire, and if a name like that doesn't sound cool to you, then just look at this character. Good golly, he's awesome.
Number 5. Witchblade. Witchblade is a hero who comes from Top Cow Productions. Mainly we've known Witchblade as Sarah Pizzini, but the Witchblade has belonged to many other powerful women throughout the years. The Witchblade is an ancient mystical artifact that typically binds itself to a host who can then wield and use its powers at will. It can be more or less powerful depending on the host, but in this case, since Sarah is one of the most well-known hosts of the Witchblade, we're gonna basically base the ranking on her abilities. The Witchblade can be used to summon mystical armor, which can cover the entirety of its host's body, though typically most are not skilled enough to actually summon that much armor, and instead are usually only covered in little pieces of armor as a result. Hence why you see that Witchblade art and she's like, not really covered in much. This armor grants the wearer invulnerability, but even if its host is harmed, it also grants the power to heal. Aside from creating armor, the Witchblade can also be used to create weapons on the fly. It also increases its host's strength and endurance. Sarah herself was also a trained NYPD detective prior to becoming the host for the Witchblade, so she also brings her skills as an officer and detective to the table.
Number 4. Miracle Man. Miracle Man is also not a new character. In fact, Marvel's Miracle Man is one of comics' most dramatic publishing debacles, coming back from 1954. Decades of rights battles over the character meant that he kind of bounced around publishers and then disappeared from the pages of comics altogether for a long time, which is why it seemed way too good to be true when Marvel announced in 2013 that it had acquired the rights to Miracle Man. Now, over the years, the company has attempted to bring the character back, but even more legal issues kind of stopped that from being able to happen. But luckily, starting in October 2022, Neil Gaiman finally continued the Silver Age arc that he had created for the character, with Marvel planning a number of other Miracle Man books. So now, after all this time, we get both one of the newest and kind of one of the oldest characters all wrapped up into one awesome Miracle Man, Marvel Man, Mickey Moran, whatever you want to call him, shaped package.
Number 3. Dracula. I think Dracula is a really important villain of Vampirella's to talk about, since he also just surprisingly married her. In Priest's Vampirella series, he had these two longtime enemies tie the knot recently, shaking things up completely. I know when I heard about this going down, I was like, what? Actually, a lot of Priest's run has been shaking up the status quo and the world of Vampirella in interesting, exciting, and of course, bloody ways. Of course, the version of Dracula we see in this series isn't the conventional one that you're used to seeing when it comes to Vampirella's comics. This version of Dracula is a reincarnation that is attempting to cheat fate by marrying Vampy, thereby altering his destiny and hopefully saving his life. For years in the comics though, Vampirella's nemesis Drac was often posed as the lord of a bunch of evil vampires, with all the vampires kind of coming from his blood lineage being corrupt in some way. It was like he only made bad vampires. That was like a whole thing. Dracula has also been shown in the past to be an exiled vampire from the planet Draculon, Vampirella's home world. Of course, Dynamite isn't the only publisher to feature Dracula. While we might be focusing on the Vampy version and his long history there, Dracula has also appeared throughout multiple different series spanning across various different publishers. And if you're like, man, but I already knew about Dracula, I don't know if you knew about his connection to Vampirella, but now you do! Yay!
Number 2. The Joneses. How about a whole family of superheroes for this spot? And not just that, but also some social and political commentary wrapped up into it. That sounds like so much fun. Not really. Anyways, out of AWA Studios comes The Joneses, which is a spin-off of another AWA Studios comic called The Resistance, and it focuses on a suburban family who have gained superpowers after a global pandemic known as the Great Death. All 4 family members, mother, father, sister, and brother, were all transformed into something superhuman, but unfortunately, the world has begun to embrace fascism, born of fear of the pandemic and the superpowered individuals that have appeared, known as the Reborns. The Joneses face some pretty scary consequences if they are exposed as Reborns, and so they are presented with the dilemma of using their abilities for good at the risk of exposing themselves and inviting danger, or just laying low and staying out of the way. It's an interesting little idea for a comic book, and the global pandemic idea seems a little bit familiar. I don't know why. So I found it fun to just jump into this little 2022 comic from AWA Studios, and maybe you will too. Number 1, Gutson Glory. If you're part of the Thunderbolts, are you really a hero? Yes, you are. The problem for me and this list is that when Gutson Glory first appeared in Thunderbolts Volume 4, Number 1 from August 2022, we weren't really given much information on the guy, and we still haven't been really, which makes my job way harder. He was placed on Hawkeye's Thunderbolts team under the mayor of New York, Luke Cage. The only reason given for this character's introduction to the team was that apparently having a, quote, man of mystery would do wonders for the team's public relations. That's actually the reason. There's literally nothing else given about why he's here. He is a big stocky guy with cyborg body parts and an absolutely insane amount of weaponry, including a particle rupture laser, which I don't even want to imagine what that thing does to a person. It just sounds horrible. He also looks a bit like Cable, as he's a totally 90s cyber-inspired warrior, but just more military and not nearly as old as Cable, with absolutely no information about his backstory, again, or his training. Thank you. Thank you so much, Marvel. Please change this. Gutson is cool, okay? Thank you. Number 10, Tosin Oduye. Tosin is such a cool character. Okay, so as a kid, Tosin Oduye saw the way that Wakanda became a socially isolated nation who believed themselves superior and seemed to always attract war. The Marube, the tribe Tosin belongs to, began to separate a bit from the main Wakandan people. They hated the way Wakanda used vibranium for tech, so they instead found a way to refine the vibranium and flow with it. They gave themselves vibranium tattoos, and some in their tribe, who trained hard enough, could have the vibranium flow with them, granting them some pretty cool powers. It's like they harness the energy of vibranium and can use it to move extremely fast, or unleash vibranium energy blasts, or even seemingly grant himself a vibranium armor. Last thing I want to say is that the covers for the issues of this volume of Black Panther are just so cool. Definitely check it out.
Number 9, Aleph Chernikoff. Aleph Chernikoff is a young mutant hero who appears in the Wolverine Patch flashback series by Larry Hama. This was a miniseries that came out earlier in 2022 and covered an untold tale from Patch's adventures in Madripoor back in the good old days. Here, Patch works to help 3 Russian mutants who have escaped their government, but have been tracked to Madripoor. Madripoor is military, royal armed guards, as well as S.H.I.E.L.D. and Russia themselves appear to be after the mutants, but Patch, Archie, and Tiger intervene in hopes of helping the 3. In the end they do, and among them is Aleph, the child of the other 2 mutants, David and Raisa. Aleph appears to be the main focus of everyone's efforts when it comes to hunting them down. They possess powerful healing abilities, psionic abilities, and possibly even the power to manipulate reality. But they're also a child, so of course everyone's like, we gotta protect this baby.
Number 8, Bitewing. There's nothing that wins me over more than a puppy. But then DC goes and gives a puppy a 3-legged gray blue-eyed Pipple puppy and gives it to Nightwing, probably one of the best members of the Bat family. And then they go and give it the nickname of Bitewing. I literally teared up just typing this part because of the overload of adorable that I got while looking at this. Haley the dog was being chased and mistreated by some teenagers when Dick Grayson stepped in, rescued, and adopted her. Now, the first sidekick turned full-on hero in DC Comics has his very own super pet, especially after she was given a costume and the ability to speak from a 5th-dimensional imp. Now, she fights alongside Nightwing as Bitewing, and it's cute. It's very cute.
Number 7, Escapade. I love Escapade, and I also love her BFF Morgan Red. While initially introduced as a criminal in the Marvel Voices Pride issue of this year, I think it's safe to say that Escapade and her friend Morgan and his genetically engineered flying turtle pal, Hibbert, will soon become a team of mutant heroes instead of anti-heroes. I mean, even if they are criminals who steal stuff, they really only try to steal stuff from the worst people, which makes them still pretty altruistic. Escapade is a trans mutant named Sheila Sexton, whose powers involve swapping places with whoever she decides to use her mutant powers on. This can be someone as low level as a random passerby, or someone as high level as another superpowered being who is about to defeat her, or even the President of the United States. So much potential for this power.
Number 6, Bolt. Since the live-action Black Adam movie was announced, DC decided that they would also put out a Black Adam solo series for the first time. And in the first issue, it puts Black Adam on the ropes of mortality. In response to this, Black Adam finds his descendant, Malik Adam White, a medical student living in the Bronx. Basically, Black Adam just tells this guy he is going to succeed Black Adam and inherit his power, and then he forces him by having one of his people pop a cap in Malik, and the only way to save himself is to take Black Adam's ring and say Shazam. While Black Adam calls Malik White Adam, Malik gives a good little lecture about the inherent racism there. So he prefers to go by Thunderbolt or just straight up Bolt. From what I've read, I really like his character, and he is supposed to represent a sort of form of redemption for the character of Black Adam because, as they say in the comic, there is no true redemption for Black Adam. Not at this point, at least.
Number 5. Amass. Amass is a really cool new mutant. They made their first appearance in Steve Orlando's Marauder series in issue number 4. Amass is a mutant of Threshold, the oldest mutant civilization to have ever existed. They, along with 2 other mutants, had their minds stored within a codex, hoping that they would arrive in the future after being restored and would be able to seek help for their people who were on the brink of extinction when they last left them in the past. Amass's mutant powers allowed them to physically combine mutants and their powers together, joining together to create one basically big ball of mutants, which kinda looks like one big being. Hence their mutant name of Amass. This appears to both psychologically and physically combine whichever mutants they choose with themselves, with their new combined form also possessing all the powers of said mutants, which I think is pretty nuts.
Number 4. Grey Wolf. Of the characters I'm talking about on this list, my favorites are absolutely a 3-way tie between Tosin, Bitewing, and this guy, Grey Wolf. Okay, so Lex Luthor was running a crime-fighting experiment around the world trying to create a group of his own similar to Batman Incorporated, with the ultimate goal of creating Abyss, his own Batman. But then he abandoned all these projects that then went wild doing their own thing. So Batman Incorporated's international team, being led by Ghostmaker, go on a mission to bring them down in Batman 2022 Annual Volume 3 Number 1 from July. Their first mission is to Kazbek, Chechnya, to take on Grey Wolf. Grey Wolf was unleashed on the city to help its citizens who had been exposed to Lazarus resin that had made them all extremely violent. With Ghostmaker, he was able to cure the residents and join Batman Inc. as a good guy, but he displayed enough skill to best Dark Ranger, El Gaucho, and Batman of Japan in a 3-on-1 fight, and he beat Wingman 1-on-1. Also, he's like 7 feet tall minimum. Super cool.
Number 3. Black Mist. Black Mist is a completely new character who is not yet a member of Batman Incorporated, but who might end up becoming one in the future. She was actually one of my favorite characters to appear in Batman Inc. issue number 1 from 2022. Not only does she look like a badass, but she also seems to be wary of joining up with Batman Inc. Black Mist appears as a sort of consulting detective in issue number 1 of the 3rd volume of this series. We don't know much about her yet, but she seems to be working with Batman Incorporated to help them solve the mystery behind just who is killing all the teachers of Batman and Ghostmaker, and why and how this perpetrator is doing that. One thing we do know about Black Mist straight out of the gate is that she seems to have history with the Knight. The two recognize each other and are presented as friendly to one another.
Number 2. Egro the Unbreakable. Okay, so this one definitely took me by a bit of a surprise. Coming out of the 2022 volume of Thunderbolts, specifically issue number 2, we are introduced to Egro. Egro is a super interesting little troll-looking monster who lives peacefully on Monster Isle. But you see, Egro heard of the monster exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, so naturally he expected to go and see his own statue. He just had to make sure that it captured his true beauty. But what the heck? They didn't have a statue for Egro the Unbreakable? An insult like that could not fly, so he obviously had to destroy the other statues for the other monsters, which brought the Thunderbolts to fight him. Instead, after Egro punched Power Man through the roof with his big lava hands and incapacitated Persuasion with his telepathic abilities, which helped him learn English, he surrendered to America Chavez and explained the situation. Then, he was invited to join the team. Yay! Happy ending for the little steroid Yoda.
Number 1. Nightmite. Just like Superman has Mr. Mxyzptlk and Batman has Batmite, Dick Grayson, the superhero known as Nightwing, now has his own imp superfan from the 5th dimension, Dixel, though Dixel prefers to be known as Nightmite. While it might seem strange to put an imp from the 5th dimension on a superhero list given, you know, some of their track records, Nightmite is genuinely well-meaning and helpful, unlike most other imps who are somewhat mischievous or just downright troublesome. Being an imp from the 5th dimension also means that Dixel can be super powerful, as he has magical, reality-bending, and warping powers. Nightmite made his first appearance very recently in the comics, as of the time of this recording, in issue number 98 of Nightwing, which was released in November of 2022. Number 10. Lord Fanny. Fanny. Lord Fanny is Hilda Morales, who was born as a boy but raised as a girl. She is a transsexual woman and one of the first trans heroes in comics. Lord Fanny was raised as a girl by her grandmother because only women in their culture could become witches, and her grandmother was a powerful witch who wanted to pass on her knowledge and power to Fanny. Although Fanny herself did choose to be a girl, if that makes sense. Lord Fanny is a member of the Invisibles team and was created by writer Grant Morrison and artist Steve Yoel. The Invisibles was a comic series that existed as part of DC's Vertigo imprint back when it was around. I miss Vertigo so much. The series began in 1994, and in issue 13 we'd learn more about Lord Fanny's origins and her very tragic backstory. Lord Fanny's such a cool character. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about even more cool, lesser known indie heroes, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Wind. Wind is the name of the main character from the self-titled series, also of course named Wind. It comes from Boom Studios and was written by James Tynion IV with art by Michael Dalianos. Wind is a teenage hero who has always hidden the truth of his elven and magical heritage as a weird blood. His heritage grants him great power he's been hiding from his whole life in an attempt to fit in, being made to believe that magic is dangerous and basically turns people into monsters, or in some other way corrupts them. When he becomes too old to hide his pointed ears and who he is any longer, he is forced to either try and change or embrace who he really is. And in order to protect his friends against those who would hunt both him and them down, Wind ultimately embraces his magical side, unleashing powerful abilities. Wind has wings, can fly, and can communicate with forest-like spirits or sprites. He also has, like many other teen heroes, the power of friendship, which usually means he ends up making friends with powerful allies. I would say if you love the world of Avatar, you might also end up falling in love with both the character Wind and his series. It reminds me of Avatar, at least, in like the best way. Number 8. Quantum and Woody. You may have heard of Valiant's character Bloodshot, who recently got his own solo film, but what about all of their other superheroes? Quantum and Woody is a series and superhero duo from Valiant Comics. It was inspired by the superhero team-up series Power Man and Iron Fist, but is a lot more bizarre. The series itself was written by Christopher Priest, with art actually by the artist who did Power Man and Iron Fist. Pretty cool. Quantum and Woody are adoptive brothers who, after years of being estranged, are brought back together when their father mysteriously dies. While trying to figure out what really happened to him, they stumble upon superpowers. The catch? They must touch their power bands at least once every 24 hours to not only keep their powers, but also keep from losing their lives as well, as they would then no longer exist if they didn't touch their band. Quantum's powers are more defense-based, while Woody's are more offensive. Oh, and they also kind of have an animal sidekick, Vincent Van Gogh, who is even more bizarre than he already sounds. Just trust me. I don't want to spoil anything, but Vincent Van Gogh. What a goat. Number 7. Josephine. More commonly referred to as Jo, Josephine is the main character and hero of the Fatale series. More commonly referred to as Jo, Josephine is the main character and hero of the Fatale series, which comes to us from Image Comics. Fatale is a supernatural noir-style comic created by the brilliant team-up of writer Ed Brubaker and artist Sean Phillips. Seriously, I love these two together. Some might argue that Jo isn't really a hero, as she's a little bit selfish, but in focusing on uncovering the mysteries of her own power and in trying to save herself, she does inevitably save others. In the long run, at least. There are a lot of people that end up being sacrificed along the way in order for Jo to stand a chance in defeating her enemies in the end. And also there are just straight up people being sacrificed along the way by her enemies who are attempting to track her down. So yeah, she kinda also gets a lot of people killed, but you know, it's not her fault. Jo's powers allow her to control all men who gaze upon her, with them being irresistibly attracted to her no matter who they are and no matter if she wants to influence them or not. Unless of course they are able to protect themselves against her influence with extremely powerful magic, which we only see from a couple characters really in the series. In other words, her power is pretty freaking strong. The only downside here, which is kind of the crux of it all, is that she can't fully control her powers. That is, she can't turn them off when she wants to, which ends up causing a lot of problems for Jo along the way, but I won't spoil any of that. Anyways, if you haven't read Fatale, it's now, I think, it's gonna be 10 years old soon, so go and read it, hurry up! Came out I think in 2012. That's when it started. Number 6. King Mob. King Mob is the leader of the Invisibles. He was once a horror writer who wrote under the pen name Kit Morrison. As the series The Invisibles is created by Grant Morrison, Mob is believed to be sort of a fictional stand-in for Morrison himself. King Mob's legal name was Gideon Starozowski, and he struggles with his alter persona, especially troubled by how violent he, as King Mob, can be. King Mob is not only a leader who wields power in that sense, because he's a leader, but also has experience with firearms and weapons, is a skilled martial artist and fighter, is psychic, can time travel, and employs the use of chaos magic. So, lots of cool things that he can do. Also, if you haven't read The Invisibles, it is really trippy. Go read it. If you like The Matrix, you'll probably like The Invisibles. If you like The Matrix and if you like Doom Patrol, which of course is also Grant Morrison. Not The Matrix, Doom Patrol. Number 5. Laura Wilson / Persephone. Laura Wilson is the main character of the Wicked and the Divine series from Image Comics. The series was created by writer Kieran Gillen and artist Jamie McKelvey. In this story, gods come to life cyclically, being kinda reincarnated. This is known as the recurrence. Laura herself is obsessed with the gods and the pantheon, who are all of course re-emerging at the time. She wants nothing more than to be a god herself. At least that is what she thinks she wants, until her wishes kind of come true. She is revealed to be Persephone, who is believed to be the final god to return during the recurrence. As Persephone, she can summon plants and vines and control them. She also seems to have some kind of control or influence over the underworld. Laura can also create fireballs and reveal to others past events, summoning visions of the past even if she was not present for those events. Number 4. Sludge. Sludge is a hero or anti-hero who comes to us initially from Malibu Comics and was created by writer Steve Gerber and artist Aaron Lopresti. Sludge was once Frank Hogue, a dirty NYPD police officer who accepted bribes in exchange for favors when it came to drug dealings. He was ordered by the crime boss he worked for, John Paul Marcello, to kill another likely dirtier cop. When Frank refused Marcello's request, Marcello had him killed instead. After being shot, a grenade went off, knocking him into a bucket of chemical waste. Who put that chemical waste there? The waste would merge with him after he was dumped into the sewers, turning him into the superheroic monstrosity Sludge. Sludge possesses a healing factor and super strength. He could also kill or mutate his opponents with just a touch. Kinda turns them into sludge. It's pretty dark, really. Number 3. Radiant Yellow. We don't know that much about the newest Radiants, but we do know that they seem interested in protecting innocent people from whatever craziness is currently going on. Okay, hard to keep talking about all of this Radiant Black series without spoiling anything, but once again, I'm gonna try my best. Radiant Yellow appears to be an older gentleman, and as far as I know, we don't really know his name yet. What we do know is that each Radiant seems to have their own power set. At least that's what we're being led to believe by the story and the imagery used. It hasn't exactly all been laid out yet, which is honestly kind of what makes this series so much fun. There's so much we don't know. The mystery of it all. Radiant Yellow, however, seems to have powers based in perhaps light manipulation. To me, that's what it looks like the force blasts that they emit are based in, and it also looks to me like they can perhaps manipulate light to create illusions. That's just based on the imagery that's surrounding them in the comics. Like the other Radiants, Yellow isn't too experienced and doesn't seem to understand the full extent of their powers just yet. Radiant Yellow comes to us from the Radiant Black series, which belongs to Image Comics and is written by Kyle Higgins, who, yes, was also the initial writer of the Power Rangers series, and it was also created by artist Marcelo Costa. Number 2. EXO Manowar. Valiant Comics actually has a whole stable and universe filled with supers, including this one here, EXO Manowar. EXO Manowar is actually the name of the sentient armor that is tied to our hero in this series, Auric of Dacia, a Visigoth from the 5th century AD. Auric would end up being abducted by aliens and enslaved for years before he managed to escape. Auric learned of where his captive's armory was kept and basically ended up getting there and then getting the EXO Manowar suit. He then bonded with the suit and used that advanced tech to escape his captors. However, due to interstellar travel, by the time he arrived back on Earth, it was now the 20th century, basically modern day. Eric would have to adjust to this very different world, and along the way would meet other superheroes from the Valiant universe. That's right, there's not just 2 more, there's a whole bunch of them. EXO Manowar is a character created by writers Jim Shooter, Steve Englehart, and as well as artists Bob Layton and Barry Windsor Smith. Number 1. Black Hammer. Black Hammer is Joe Weber, the title character of the Black Hammer series, written by Jeff Lemire with artwork by the amazing Dean Ormston. The Black Hammer series was made to be completely different from other more traditional superhero comics, but if I did have to compare Black Hammer to anyone from that more conventional world, I would liken him to Thor myself. Joe Weber inherited the hammer and powers of the former Black Hammer when he died, being transported to the realm of New World as soon as he himself had picked up the fallen hammer. There he learned that he was meant to become the new Black Hammer, replacing the fallen one as Starlock's new and most powerful warrior in the fight against Starlock's evil twin, the Anti-God. While being the title character, Black Hammer isn't actually the main character of this series. As we learn near the end of issue number 1, Black Hammer sacrificed himself to save the world from the Anti-God and keep his fellow superheroes and friends alive. But what really happened to him, and just how and why are his teammates now seemingly trapped in the timeless and kinda eerie town of Rockwood? Well, to find out, you'll have to read on, true believers. But honestly, you should just go read Black Hammer because it's pretty great. Everyone go read all the Black Hammer things. It's like a whole universe now.
And at 10, Werewolf by Night. The first time we've seen Moon Knight in the comics actually wasn't in his own series, but rather Werewolf by Night number 32. He faced off against Jack Russoff, aka Werewolf by Night, making Russoff his enemy. However, technically, Moon Knight was the villain in this scenario, hence its placement at number 10. Jacob Russoff is a werewolf, but unlike his dad, also a werewolf, Jack could control when and where he would transform, not just under a full moon. He had much more control over his abilities in werewolf form as well, except for when there was a full moon, because that's when Jack would be at his strongest but also completely out of control, which is a concept that sounds a lot like a D&D character. His superpowers include werewolf physiology along with superhuman strength, speed, durability, agility, stamina, a healing factor, and of course a hairy body packed with a nasty set of teeth and killer claws, something the ladies love. And at 9, Morpheus. Morpheus first appeared in Moon Knight number 12 back in the early 80s, and he's one of the rare horrifying characters that people actually feel sympathy for. Despite his vampiric appearance, he should not be mistaken for Morbius. This is a different person. The character who's getting the standalone movie, no one knows what universe it's in. Yeah, Morbius is indeed a pseudo-vampire, while Morpheus is something else entirely. His real name is Robert Markham, and he got sick from an old virus that caused segments of his DNA to be inhibited by the virus. He sought medical attention and Dr. Peter Alron gave him an untested drug to help him, but it all backfired, causing Markham to change dramatically appearance-wise while also taking away Markham's need for sleep and giving him unfathomable psionic powers. However, the lack of sleep rendered him crazy, after which he had taken the alias Morpheus after the Olympian god of dreams. With his newfound powers, Morpheus sought revenge upon Alron, only to encounter Moon Knight in the process. And at 8, Count Nefario. While Count Nefario wasn't purely evil at first, his desire for more wealth and power is ultimately his downfall, and he's very nefarious. He has been around for years and years, fighting almost every single Avenger he can think of. He also encountered Moon Knight after Mark Specter moved to LA and joined the West Coast Avengers, primarily becoming his villain. Count Nefario is immortal and has an unfathomably strong healing factor, because, you know, he's immortal. He received energy projection from the Living Laser, strength from Power Man, and speed from Whirlwind, all amplified 100 times. He can lift well over 100 tons, fly over 5,000 miles per hour, teleport, leech another person's energy, and so much more. However, it's likely that if you are a fan of Moon Knight, you knew about this guy, so he's not very high on the list. But honestly, not having known much about Moon Knight before this list, aside from he looks freaking awesome, all these villains are pretty new to me, so it's pretty cool getting to see all the characters that this guy has faced, and hopefully you at least hear about a few that you didn't know about. But no complaining if you're a Moon Knight superfan, okay? That's not allowed. That's cheating. And at 7, Dead Zone. There are a few characters more 90s than Dead Zone, but he has his appeal. Dead Zone sort of emulates the classic Iron Man villain Whiplash with his electrical whips, but he's less a mercenary than just an ideological warrior. He seeks to punish sinners by lashing them to death, that has him run afoul with Moon Knight. Dead Zone first appeared in Moon Knight's solo title and is pretty evenly matched for the character. When Moon Knight tried to take him down with his adamantium, Dead Zone catches it and then turns it around on him. There is very little on the wiki about him, and honestly I don't know what else I could say about him, but he's trying to do what Moon Knight does, but going about it in an absolutely abysmal way. Like, come on bro, really? Whips? Like, I get that they're OP in like the Spider-Man PS4 game, but seem seriously underpowered in real life or in comic books, unless they need them for plot or you're into that kind of thing. And at 6, Black Specter. Carson Knowles was a veteran who returned home without applause. His job had been passed on and his wife left him with their son. He barely got by as a delivery man and found out his son was killed by phone. After his car was stripped for parts and a mugger accosted him, Knowles snapped and beat the man nearly to death. Seeking to destroy the city that treated him so badly, Carson Knowles ran as a dark horse candidate for mayor on his father's name and political connections. He also created a second identity as Black Specter, beating and blackmailing the local precinct boss to support Knowles, and then in a fight with Moon Knight his mask slipped, but Moon Knight was unable to convince anyone that the mayoral candidate Knowles and Black Specter were the same person. Eventually though, Moon Knight defeated Black Specter in public and his assistant Marlene Arlone uncovered Knowles' corrupt plans for the city and his political office. So at least he lost. Halfway through into number 5, Shadow Knight. Shadow Knight's real name is Randall Specter, Mark's younger brother. He was envious of Mark his entire life, which turned him into a horrible criminal. There was a murderer on the streets killing nurses called the Hatchet Man, so Moon Knight used his girlfriend Marlene as like bait to catch the killer. The plan worked, but Marlene perished. Yeah, and to make matters even worse, the Hatchet Man was revealed to be Randall. Randall later joined the cult of Khonshu, which ultimately resulted in him receiving the same powers as his brother Mark. However, he ended up choosing to use them for evil, donning the pseudonym Shadow Knight. Because, you know, every character needs to have a reverse version of themselves. Reverse Flash, Dark Archer, Bizarro. It was devastating for Mark to fight his brother and ultimately kill him by slitting his throat with a throwing crescent. Yeah, it doesn't get much worse than that, especially when you learn that Mark tried protecting Randall their entire lives. But then again, he killed your girlfriend, so... And at 4, Midnight Man. Originally a collector of art, Anton Mogart would commit robberies at the stroke of midnight to build his collection. When Moon Knight stops him, he seemingly drowns in a river, but instead, he ends up becoming deformed by the waste found within the sewers. Then he goes insane and starts collecting trash, and teams with Bushman to defeat their sworn enemy. When Midnight Man finds out he's dying from cancer, he decides to find his son, hoping that he can share some of his final moments with him. Mogart does what he can to stop his son from turning to a life of crime like he once did, and in the wake of his death, he becomes the hero Midnight. It didn't last, and he ended up becoming a cyborg for the Secret Empire, which, while sounding bad, I think it would be kind of cool, like, to be a cyborg. Like, as long as I still have, like, my free will, and my programming isn't controlling me, because that just doesn't sound like fun. Like, I want to be able to turn my arm into a giant cannon. That'd be great. Someone tries to mug me, I'm just like, sorry. Getting close to the end in number 3, Cactus. Sometimes a name is just a name. It could have meaning, or it could just be something cool that the guy thought of that ended up kind of making sense. Other times names are extremely direct and are probably too on point. That's the case with Cactus, who is exactly what he sounds like and nothing more. Created by Dominus, he's been a villain of the West Coast Avengers and Moon Knight on various occasions. Punching him definitely stings, but beyond that, it doesn't take all that much to break him or chop him up, because, you know, he's a cactus, which has actually happened before, though he can regenerate lost limbs, which I don't know if cactuses can do or cacti can do, but yeah, he's without a doubt one of the lamest villains in the Marvel Universe, but in my opinion, that makes him one of the coolest. This guy is literally a cactus, and that's hilarious. A couple years ago, the girl I was with at the time and I came up with a superhero that we called Cact Guy, who was basically in essence Cactus, and we didn't know that it was actually a thing. But it's funny to me that someone actually made this and then put it in the goddamn Marvel universe. That's hilarious. That's amazing. And Cactus is my new favorite villain ever because of that. Hashtag Cactus in the MCU. Ultimately, in at number 2, Seth Falcon. He belongs to a Scottish sect of Knights Templar and has several amazing powers. I'll never do that accent again. Falcon first appeared in Mark Spector Moon Knight number 43. Seth Falcon is immortal, has superhuman strength and stamina, but his strongest power is his touch. Using his clawed fingers, Falcon can drain the life force out of any living being, aging them in the process. If he holds his grip for long enough, Seth can drain the entire life out of somebody, all of it, turning them into a rotted skeleton. However, there's a catch. Due to biofeedback, the draining process backfires if Seth uses it on anybody who shares his DNA code, even partially. Simply put, he can't drain his relatives because it causes the series of issues that then hurts and weakens his powers. And yep, that's right. You guessed it, of course, Moon Knight turns out to be one of his long-lost relatives, so Falcon has to rely on his superhuman strength and stamina to outlast Mark Specter in any mutual fight. Which is good, because that kind of like levels the playing field. And finally, in at number 1, Hunter's Moon. Dr. Batter was born in Luxor, Egypt to 2 doctors and was an excellent student throughout his life, eventually becoming a doctor as well. He grew to become a very rational and serious person who didn't believe in any higher entities, despite still attending prayer and studying the Quran and the Hadith. This all changed when he was attacked by vampires and left to die on the streets, at which point he met the Egyptian moon god Khonshu. Dr. Batter survived and became a worshipper of Khonshu, who fancied himself the god's second highest priest, and opposite of Mark Specter. After learning that Moon Knight had taken in vampires under his protection, Dr. Batter terrorized the Nightwalkers to get his attention. Hunter's Moon eventually confronted Moon Knight, chastised him for taking in enemies of Khonshu, and expressed his intentions to correct him. Dr. Batter beat Moon Knight and invaded the Midnight Mission to kill the vampires, but Specter recovered and knocked him unconscious after attacking him from behind. But you know what, after beating him, I'm not even gonna call it, that's kinda shady. I respect it.